Welcome back, all my 40k fanatics out there. I'm DJ here at Tim's Nation to bring you my list that will be taking on lane later on this evening. Now, with this list, I'm typically a Canoptic Court Necron player, but lane has got a couple GTs lined up, and since I'm on baby watch, I want to get them prepped and ready for these tournaments. So, something that I don't typically run here, and it's not one of my choices for Necrons, but it's definitely a popular choice, and one he'll probably see, is the Hypercrypt. So, today I'm going to be running a Hypercrypt list to help lane prep for these GTs. The reason I don't run Hypercrypt as much is, and this is a personal feeling, this is my personal opinion, and maybe it's just how I come across the games when I play these two armies. Hypercrypt, I feel like when it wins, oh man, it wins and it wins big. But the logic with Hypercrypt, as we've seen, is take big things, throw them in your opponent's face, and hit them really hard. And that's what I'm going to be doing today. For me, I feel like Hypercrypt, when it runs into its bad matchups, they're really bad, as opposed to Canoptic Court, where it has some bad matchups, but it still has tools and tech to get out of those matchups. So for me, I prefer the Canoptic Court over the Hypercrypt for those reasons. Some other people may feel differently, especially with the Hypercrypt rule to be able to pick models up and move around the field. You may go, well, wait, I have all the options to get out of bad situations. You may think so. You may think that. But when push comes to shove, and I get it. I play with Grey Knights, and Grey Knights can do it. Some of those cheaper units don't have as much presence on the table late into the game to be able to push and score those points. Now, that's my personal feeling about it. My personal feeling, like I said, Canoptic Court has more ins and outs to get out of bad matchups than Hypercrypt. Team events, Hypercrypt is the king. Hypercrypt is a king way over, and if I'm running Necrons in a team event, I'd probably run Hypercrypt. Regardless, this is a singles GT, where Lane will be taking his Dev Watch list. This is a list that, if you're not familiar with, he is able to do a severely scary amount of devastating wounds due to a relic called the Tome of Ectoclades that allows him to choose 2 units to reroll all wounds against. That's huge damage for off the Tome of Ectoclades when so many devastating guns in that army. Hypercrypt, this is one it can hurt twofold. One, we do have spiders to be able to stop and give a 5-up feel no pain against mortal wounds, which dev wounds are mortal that don't carry over. Also, I have 2 really big units. He could put the targets as his Tome of Ectoclades targets, remove those 2 big guys, and put me in a very, very difficult position late in the game. So this will be an interesting matchup to see how that all plays out with some of the abilities that I have in Hypercrypt versus the Death Watch. And ultimately will be a good practice game for him going into the GTs. All right, let's take a look at the list and what I'm going to be bringing today. All right, here it is. Don't adjust your sets. That is correct. That is a Tesseract Vault there. This is my Hypercrypt. I'm real excited to bring this thing today. I tried to make this thing as nasty as I possibly could to practice in the lane. So my Hypercrypt, we'll start off with the elephant in the room. And when I mean elephant, he's a big one. That is the Tesseract Vault. Now, I've seen, actually, this is not that crazy. There has been a couple of tournament and competitive lists that have been popping up that are running the T-Vault. T-Vault is big, it's mean. It's got the ability now to use 2 of the Catan powers instead of just 1 at the Codex release. So this thing can do a lot of damage. Out of Hypercrypt, you can pick this thing up because it isn't a monster and bring it back down. Now, there is a consensus online, or I would say not really a consensus. There is a debate online on whether or not this thing can be placed 6 inches from a board edge and be legal because part of it hangs off because of GW having some conflicting rules. So I would say definitely check that with a TO beforehand. In this matchup, we're going to err on the side of caution, where I will only drop this thing in, and I will bring it in and probably use the strat to drop within 3 inches. And I'm fine with that because most of our other stuff, segue over, the Monolith has Deep Strike inherently. So where the Tesseract Vault, let's slide back over to him, has flamethrowers, 3d6 flamethrower with dev wounds, an anti-character shot for 6 flat damage, also with dev wounds, and its antimatter meteor, which has dev wounds at d6 plus 3 shots. This guy can really crank out a lot of damage, caps at strength 10 for its weapons. When we move over, and the Tesla spheres, which are good. I can't write those off. Tesla spheres are very, very good too. Volume of shots and the sustain too, very good weapons. We move over to the monolith, who has the death rays. So as long as we stay below toughness 12, and I guess I'm going to be facing a land raider, these guns can be pretty good. But I feel like that T12 is going to be a tough spot for the monolith, just because it'll only be wounding on 4s, single shot but sustained D3. These have all the feeling of the casino guns that we see for like AdMech, or not AdMech, Votan, where you need to hit those 6s, and then this gun can really go off. The thing is, with the casino guns that the Votan have, they're able to run multiple of those things. So one of them is bound to be a little bit better than most. This is one monolith. Now, the particle whip is still very, very nasty. And with this combined with the vault is a lot of damage that we can do to tougher infantry and remove them from the field. So that's a cool thing. Oh, also, I can't forget the monolith slaps in combat, which is hilarious. It has a very solid combat profile, hitting on 2s with, I believe, 6 attacks. So these guys are big and chunky. I do have a strat to give a 4-up invul, can give it to the monolith and give him a 4-up invul, and then both of them have basically the same defensive stat profile, with the monolith having, I think, 2 less wounds than the vault. But we also have another layer of defense with the Canoptic Spiders. Now, these are also vehicles, so I could hit them with the 1 CP, 4-up invul, and strat all the same. I took them in a unit to make them tougher to peel, but mostly these guys are there for one reason: to give a 6-up feel no pain to these vehicles and a 5-up feel no pain to mortal wounds to the rest, and psychic attacks to the rest of my army. Things like these devastating wounds, that is very critical, because this could actually slow them down, where the Tome of Ectoclades, they don't take both of them out, and I end up having one to go into the next round, one of these two, the monolith or the vault. Spiders still have the particle beamers, because that's all free. But these guys are, like I said, their primary goal is going to be buffing those. And the last piece on my offense, it's 2 units, but it's the piece on the offense, is this 20-man brick of Gauze Reaper warriors. These guys are led by a Royal Warden and a Plasmancer with 2 Crypt Thralls for a little extra resilience. The Plasmancer is going to give them the 5-up crits, plus all his little snazzy guns, like his ability to do mortal wounds on a 4-up. You roll 4 dice, any 4-ups, boom, mortal wounds. Or maybe 3 dice. I'm sorry if I misspoke there. And then he has his lance for an additional 3 shots, which is, I believe, 2 damage as well. He's already has that. Now, the Royal Warden, this is the first time running him, as you can obviously tell with, I don't have any of them painted. The Royal Warden gives me the ability to fall back and still shoot, which is critical for a squad that has no real combat potential. His gun slaps as well. 2 shots with rapid fire, that's flat 2 damage, so he can mow down some infantry as well. Now, as far as enhancements go, I actually have 2 in this unit, one on the Plasmancer and one on the Royal Warden. So we have one enhancement that gives this unit Deep Strike. The other enhancement gives this unit the ability to have full rerolls to hit when it enters from strategic reserve. This means hypercrypting. This means going through the monolith gateway, any of that stuff. These guys can get full rerolls to hit. So that combined with lethal 5-ups means a lot of damage. Some of you may say, but they're only AP1. And I'd say you're right. And that's why we have Illuminar Xeris. Illuminar Xeris will be giving these guys an additional AP, as well as giving them Armor of Contempt. Very good buffs. And then on his own, he's going to be able to complete actions, shoot, and just be a fighty base. Now, some people are like, well, you should have more battle line. And I agree. It's crazy. I'm running 1 battle line unit and running Xeris. I get it. But Xeris is cheap, and he still is a tank that can beat up some things, shoot well, and complete action. So at his 150 points, there's still value behind him that I'm looking forward to seeing today. Xeris is going to have to do some work. Xeris is infantry, so he is a target that can come out of the monolith or just Hypercrypt and all that stuff too. But I'm very curious to see, because I've always looked at Xeris and gone, yes, this ability is awesome. And I mean, if I didn't even have one battle line unit, then it would be a complete waste. But I'm like, he just thumps by himself. So it's cool to see him. I feel like he is a needed piece in this. I don't feel like he's as out of place as some would think, just because of the fact that these single models and the hypercrypt and stuff like that, he has a lot he can do in completing secondaries as well. Now let's move over into that secondary game and talk about some things. So first thing we have is 2 5-man squads of Death Marks. Death Marks have Deep Strike. So when I pick them up, they can Deep Strike back down. They will be able to do a lot of work just playing the game and scoring me secondaries. Not really much else there. Yes, their sniper rifles, flat 2 damage with precision. Could be fun, could be neat, but honestly, their biggest goal is just keep scoring. We also have 2 Hexmark destroyers. Look at that. One of them, the one that's painted, will have the enhancement that allows me to hypercrypt an additional unit, while the other one will just be hanging out there. These guys are small. They have deep strike inherently, so they are going to also be a very big part of my secondary game. Yeah, there's a lot of cool things these guys can do, but the biggest part of this is the secondary game, so I can keep on a forward offense with things like the Vault, the Monolith, and the Warriors. Next, we have the Flayed Ones. So the Flayed Ones have Infiltrate, and they are in there in case this list goes first, because going second is the best place for Hypercrypt. Going first, I need some ability to not completely skunk out on the first turn. Flayed Ones being able to infiltrate can at least get out of my deployment zone, get onto an objective. They will get obliterated most likely afterwards, but I can at least score the points with a relatively cheap unit. They do have stealth, so it's not like they're completely defenseless, but they are only a 4-up save with 1 wound apiece, so they go quickly. They go very quickly. And last in the same column is something that kind of bridges more into damage as well as movement, is a 6-man squad of the Tomb Blades. Look at that. Look how much I don't have painted. So I want to say this, peace of mind. I am actually working very, very hard on getting my Canoptic Court up to par. I have a base scheme now, and I've been doing the bases for them. So hopefully here soon, I will have them on the channel and you get to see all the glory. But that is what I'm hard at work on. And this is, again, a list I wasn't planning on taking to a tournament. So this one, yeah, there's a couple things in here like the Royal Warden and the Hexmark. Yeah, there's a couple things that I'm a little embarrassed by. These being them as well. So this unit has 5 particle beamers and 1 Tesla. The reason for the Tesla is so that I know you can't advance and do actions, but being able to advance, shoot, and then move could be critical. Just to be able to finish off, engage on all fronts and stuff like that. We'll see. That's going to be one thing I want to try out, but I feel like just 1 Tesla is not that bad. The particle beamer is a gun that does devastating wounds. It has blast. It's D6 shots. It's so good. It's so, so good. These guys have the ability to do some damage. They're 2 wounds apiece. They will have stealth as one of their buffs, so that's a big part of it. They're going to be surprisingly nimble to take down. And they're able to move real quick, and they have their ability to shoot and then move. So there's a lot these guys can do. They're going to be a big part of my secondary game, but I took a larger brick so that it takes a little more effort to get rid of them, on top of the fact that they can put a lot more firepower into some units and do more damage. So they're kind of in that bridge gap of something that's able to do some damage. I'm not going to the weight of the world is not on their shoulders to end games, but they're going to be able to score points in the secondary, which is a big thing that I need for this list, to be able to make sure I'm maintaining it into the deep portions of the game. All right, so that's the list. I'm actually super excited to play it because I do love my Grey Knights. I love my Necrons, and this is a combination of them both. Personally, yes, Canoptic Court is my favorite. That's the one I like running the most. But that doesn't mean I hate this. I don't hate this at all. I don't really hate anything in Necrons, or I'll play any of the Necron detachments. I love them all, even Annihilation Legion. But this is not my first go-to for competitive lists as far as Hypercrypt is concerned. If I'm going to play that style, I would play Grey Knights. And I think that's part of it too, is that it's like if I didn't own Grey Knights, if I didn't have Grey Knights as an army, I might be more compelled to play Hypercrypt more. But because I have Grey Knights, it's like, well, if I'm going to do that style, why not play Grey Knights? Because that's all they do right now without a codex. So it's kind of I think it's kind of one of those things. Plus, I love my Canoptic units. That's a big part too. So this list, I do plan on hitting lane hard early. You know, as Hypercrypt is the early game of Hypercrypt, you can pretty much write it on a note card of what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and how it's going to happen. And then it's what you do into the late games and what you play. You know, what I do with the death marks and the hex marks, how I decide to score points. If I sacrifice a unit for points, or do I hold it back and let points go? Those are definitely things that are going to be tactical decisions late into the game to see how they go. The Tomb Blades are going to be a big part of that as well, too. They're going to be able to clean up a lot of units that the Vault or the Monolith leave damaged, that they'll be able to come in and clean those things up. And the survivability behind the Warriors. There's a lot of cool little tricks I can do. We'll see how they play out with some of that stuff, being able to bounce around the field with stuff like that late into the game. Initially, yes, lane's going to get hit really heavy, real early with the Monolith, a Vault, and Warriors, and it's just going to be right into his face and as much damage as I can do before he goes into his Tome of Ectoclate's turn and tries to remove my Vault and my Monolith. So we're going to see how we can do with all that. I know that he has some big things, but for the most part, he's still got that heavy, devastating wound, alpha strike style that's going to be sitting in his reserve. So see how this plays out. It'll definitely be an excellent practice game for him to see, because I know that if he does run into someone, they most likely will be a little more seasoned with the list than I am. They may not, I mean, you know, I know Necrons really, really well. I've been playing them for a very long time, but I haven't played the Hypercrypt as much, especially with the Monolith. However, this will allow him to see the tricks that he's going to need to dodge and watch out for, because I feel like the opening game for the Hypercrypt doesn't really change very much. It's hit your opponent with this big stuff as quick as possible. So I feel like that part of the game is still how Hypercrypt plays. You don't really want to delay things. You don't really want to sit back and go, you know what? I'm not going to send my Monolith in there. I'm not going to get my Monolith at least to center field, because then it's not doing as much for you in the overall of the game. There is the possibility, and I say Monolith, there is the possibility of using a Monolith a little more defensively and using the strat to bring a unit out once it's done damage. But I feel like that is lining up to punch somebody. You get there, you go to punch, they go to block, and right before you make contact with them, you teleport into a mile away. And it's like, okay, but why? But why? And in some ways, those units need to be in the forefront. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that strat and the general scheme of the game. Because it's like, oh, but you can bring a unit out here and take an objective. But you probably had the Monolith on the objective, and no one was taking that from you anyways. I mean, the Monolith almost covers the entire objective with its size. It gives like little spots, and you can just pick and choose what units you take out. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But that's just how it kind of feels like that ability. It's like if you're on an objective and you pull a unit through, weren't you already taking that objective? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe someone could tell me some scenarios where they've seen that and they're like, no, this was amazing. You're missing this. This was great for this and that. Yeah, there might be a scenario I'm totally missing with it. And then the Vault, I'm definitely excited to see this thing now. I've tried it once before we got better with it, before we were allowed 2 Catan powers. So I'm looking forward to just rolling a bunch of dice and seeing. Unfortunately, with Lane's list, he usually does have a ton of firepower, especially for big things like this. So sadly, I'm not anticipating the Vault is going to survive that long. Here's hoping. I put a lot of defense in there. So we'll see. And also, the Monolith is going to be out there too. So the Monolith, I don't know if Lane can take both of them down in a turn. So, but I feel like the Vault will draw most of the attention first, We'll see, because again, if I spike saves, the vault lives. So that's a big part of it. Feel no pains off the spiders. I have some defense. Let's see what this can do. We're hoping that we can get, if that vault gets through Elaine's Tome of Ectoclade's turn, it probably will not be able to destroy it, and we're going to get to go really crazy with that thing. Man, every time I play it and I put it on the table and I stand behind it, I feel like One Winged Angel should be playing, like just behind it. I just hear that symphony in my head because just the epicness of the vault when you actually put it, like, it looks cool as a model. When you have it on your table, you have it on your desk, you have it in your display case, you look at it, you're like, oh, this thing looks cool. But then when you put it on a table and you start moving it and you're standing behind this thing going, and the vault moves, it feels powerful. I love that thing. So I'm definitely excited to get back on the table. All right, guys. As always, thanks for watching. We'll talk to you again soon.